Hello, anyone who is joining us after the fact. We are delighted that you are following along through these recordings and hope that you are enjoying it as much as we are. All right, let us begin with prayer. God, faithful and loving, though we lose our way, you seek us and call us back. Give us the courage to face our faults. Help us to repent, reconcile, and amend our ways that we may find our peace. Through Jesus Christ, our liberator, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Amen. All right. Before we get into Genesis, I just wanted to spend maybe 3 or 4 minutes talking about what we should study next. By my reckoning, if we keep going at the pace we've been keeping, we will be finished with Genesis by the end of January or maybe the first week of February. So I'm wondering what you all are thinking about for the next read. Fred has put in a strong request that we not push forward into Exodus, which was never my intent personally, but I don't know if anyone else feels that way as well. What thoughts do you all have? Do you have thoughts?
Did you talk about Luke?
I mentioned Luke. Yeah, I did mention Luke.
That's the only one we haven't done.
Exactly. And we're in the Luke year right now in the election. So there's
That would be good.
some sense to doing that. Any other requests or suggestions? I know, Elin, you'll be away for a while, but you'll be back soon enough that you'll connect with whatever it is that we're doing.
Did Fred once suggest James?
We did James. Yeah, we did do James. Fred has mentioned some of the apocalyptic literature before. He's, as you know, pretty interested in the end times. So we could certainly choose something from the apocalyptic tradition, or we could do Luke, or we could do something really different.
I'd rather finish the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and do Luke and maybe save the other for later.
That makes some sense.
I'm fine with Luke.
Yeah, okay. I'd be okay with that.
Luke sounds good.
All right. LA, thoughts?
I'd like that. And maybe if there is a writer that you're fond of, I don't know enough. The only writer I really know is C.S. Lewis, and I've sort of tiptoed into his the Pilgrim's Regress, for instance. But I would be happy to be guided to some of the easier, more approachable faith writers, philosophers. But I would love Luke.
Okay, I think we have a plan. And I will promise Fred, and Fred, if you're watching this after the fact, I have witnesses here. We promise you that after we do Luke, we will consider some apocalyptic literature because you have been asking for that for a while. And I want to make sure that everyone's preferences get met at one point or another. But it does seem like there's a strong desire to do Luke, to finish the Gospels, and especially since we're in the Luke year, it makes some sense. And we've read Acts already, which of course is 2 of the Gospel of Luke. So we really need to read part 1. Having read Acts together already, there'll be some resonances, and I think it makes some sense to do that. Well, thank you all. That was very helpful to get that input. Excellent. Okay, so by my reckoning, and Elin, am I right about this? We're on chapter 44. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Because I know you keep me on
beginning of 44.
Great. I'm going to have to pay attention more while you're gone. Okay. So just a reminder, what happened last week with Joseph. Does anyone remember what we talked about last time?
Mm. His brothers. All about his brothers visiting Egypt for food. The
Yeah.
second time.
Okay, so there was famine in Canaan, and so brothers went back down to Egypt. And who had been detained in Egypt with Joseph?
Simon,
Benjamin.
Or
Simeon.
Simeon, which one was it?
Simeon.
Benjamin.
Yeah, and so Simeon had been detained, and the brothers went back to Jacob. And then, as the famine intensified, they went back down, and Joseph had requested that they bring Benjamin, the baby, the second son of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, and the full brother of Joseph. Jacob had sons by many women, but Joseph and Benjamin are full brothers because they're both the sons of both Jacob and Rachel. So that's where we are now. Anything else you want to say before we move into the story?
Well, his father was very reluctant to allow Benjamin to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And Judah has put his neck on the line that he's going to keep him safe,
Exactly. Excellent.
bring him back.
Or else what will happen if not?
His children will be forfeited.
It's a horrible, right? It's said last time. Imagine offering up Jacob's grandsons in as basically as ransom for Benjamin. I mean, it's a horrible thing. There's horrible in this. If you really take the story, as this family saga, and you say, I don't want to see old stuff, then it's not pleasant, much of it. But there you have it. All right. Would somebody be interested in reading the first 17 verses of chapter 44? And I can make it larger for you.
I'll do that.
Thank you, Ray. I'll scroll.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Then he commanded the steward of his house, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money on top of the sack. Put my cup, the silver cup, in the top of the sack of the youngest, and his money for the grain, with his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. When they had gone only a short distance from the city, Joseph said to his steward, Go, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, Why have you returned evil for good? Why have you stolen my silver cup? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks? Does he not indeed use it for divination? You have done wrong in doing this. When he overtook them, he repeated these words to him, and they said to him, Why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants that they would do such a thing. Look, the money that we found on top of our sacks, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. Why then would we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Should it be found with any one of our servants, let him die. There, moreover, the rest of us will become my Lord's slaves. He said, Even so, in accordance with your words, let it be. He with whom it is found shall become my slave, and the rest of you shall go free. Then each one quickly lowered his hand, and each opened his sack. He searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Each one loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city.
You want to do this last paragraph here, Ray?
Judah and his Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house when he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, What deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that one such as I can practice divination? And Judah said, "What can we say to my Lord? What can we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Here we are then, my Lord's slaves, both we and also the one in whose possession the cup has been found." But he said, "Far be it from me that I should do so. Only the one in whose possession the cup was found shall be my slave. But as for you, go up in peace to your father."
Thank
Oh my
you.
word.
Oh my word. Yes. The soap opera continues. Okay, what do you want to focus on?
I
Joseph,
can't imagine why Joseph did
he's having fun with his brothers.
Mhm.
Boy, is he playing with them, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's
They
terrifying.
have treated him badly. He feels, anything he does short of killing them is fair
Pretty much
game.
fair game.
I'm
If you have brothers, you'd understand.
I had three.
Well, then you understand.
I have noticed that, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that this is the first time that I've heard Joseph be very arrogant when he says, "Don't you know that I can practice divinations? Like, I know everything that's going on. I'm omnipotent. I know it all, and you should have known rather than mess with me."
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good point.
Of course,
Well, I
he
took
knows it
that
all.
as
He
under
planted it.
under.
Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
I took that as, I mean, that's part of his shtick with the Egyptians is he can know what's going on everywhere. One more example of Joseph telling the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's also Joseph showing off his superiority anyway, which he's did when he was a teenager.
But couldn't it be
Yes.
that he's trying to give his brothers an insight into who he is? Because
Mhm.
he had told them about his dreams before they
Mhm.
left.
A
Ah,
hint.
oh, that's interesting, Elin. That makes
Uh-huh.
sense.
Mhm.
What do you think about the brothers' behavior, given what they did to him when he was younger, when they were all younger? What do you think about what's going on with them now?
I'm reading this as that they're pretty much oblivious still to who he is. They don't act like they have even a clue. Um, I don't, that's about as far
No.
as I can go with that.
They just sound honestly baffled. Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's
And they're
trying to
actually
give
kind of
them a
desperate
clue.
right now because there's, somebody's life is going to be on the line. There's this all-powerful person. And we're completely in his mercy.
Mm.
Although they're hanging together a little more, and they come back and say, "We'll all be your slaves."
Yeah.
And even though, and I don't know what they're thinking about Benjamin, if they think he actually took it. Uh, that's unclear. They're not,
Mm-hmm.
they're not really saying we didn't take it. Or I guess they're sort of saying that, but I mean, it's weird, the
Yeah.
the whole situation.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. But it is interesting. God has found out the guilt of your servants. Well, they didn't take it. I mean, maybe they don't know
Yeah.
that Benjamin didn't take it, but you're right. They're collectivizing this, right? That this is, I'm not sure that's a word, but they are, they're all taking this on. And is it possible that they're talking about their guilt from years back as well? Is there some of that that's weighing on them? Is this, some latent desire for repentance, for restitution? Hard to know. We don't have full access into the hearts, but it seems like there's some kind of character shift going on here, maybe.
I
Or
think they're just trying to knuckle under him. I mean, it's a dog on his back with his legs in the air. This is be merciful. We have no idea what's going on, but just don't kill us.
Yeah.
I don't think they're making any connection with, I mean, the losing Joseph was decades ago at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they want to go home without Benjamin.
Ah,
No,
That's
no, they
true.
can't.
Mhm.
they'll be in big trouble.
Yeah.
But why would they offer for them all to become his slaves? And why did they talk about the guilt of your servants, plural? It's interesting that it's like they're all hanging together. Um,
Do they still think that he's likely to kill Benjamin because Benjamin had the cup?
maybe.
I think they don't want to go back to their father
No.
without Benjamin. So they might as well just be there. They're going to live a life of misery. If they return without him, they might as well just stay where they
Maybe
are
yours.
and be with him.
So slavery would be preferable to going back to Jacob empty-handed, as it were. Mhm. Mhm. And of course, the dramatic irony of Joseph saying, "Do you not know that one such as I can practice divination?" Well, sure, it's easy to practice divination when you planted the cup in the first place. Lo and behold, I told you one of you had stolen it. Well, yeah. So if there is some humor in the story as well.
I
And
had an out of the box thought when I read this to try to make sense of it, that this is sort of a inverted or reverse Rachel, where she had taken the household gods
Ah,
Uh,
and they weren't discovered, while here he didn't take anything and it is discovered.
I don't think that's
I
out
don't
of the
know what
box
to
at all.
make of that, but it
I don't,
just
yeah, I don't think that's out of the box at all, John. It seems pretty uh much related to my mind as well. And of course, that's his mother, right? So there's definitely this through line. And what is God, what is God doing? What is the author of this passage doing? Making that connection. Ray, does Alter say anything about that? Do you know? Do you have Alter in front of you?
I've got Alter in front of me, and which part of this do you want? Mine is not. Well, mine is not. It does
Oh,
not
right,
have
because it
the
doesn't have.
versification.
That's right. Well, I don't know if there's any footnote about
Well, let me get back to the footnotes.
Benjamin not having taken the cup and the connection with Rachel having stolen the household gods. I think that's absolutely right. That there is definitely a connection. Let me just look and see if there's anything in my footnotes. I don't see anything.
says the Hebrew Lex, why have you stolen my silver cup?
Hmm.
I don't know what that should.
I'm not seeing anything in the footnotes yet on Rachel.
But I do think, John, that you're spot on with that, because I mean, we have this repeat and throughout
Okay.
all of, oh, go ahead, Ray.
It's a long passage, but that stealing a sacred object would have been deemed a capital crime. The brothers' words are quite similar to those spoken by their father to Laban before he rummaged through the belongings of Jacob's wives in search of the missing household gods. Bingo.
Yeah.
It is a teasing parallel with crucial differences. Laban does not find what he is looking for, but the death sentence pronounced on the guilty party, Benjamin's mother, Rachel, appears to be carried out later when she dies bearing him. So that's as far as the altar goes.
But I think that's there's the connection. Gold star to John. And throughout this whole Genesis cycle, or certainly throughout the Jacob cycle, there have been all these doublings, right? We've had twins and we've had repeated themes and things happen twice. So it doesn't surprise me that the inverse of the Rachel story would happen now. Excellent. Anything else about this first section before we push on? Okay. let's see, let me scroll up. So, all right, one long paragraph ends this chapter. Would someone like to read it for us?
I can read it.
Thank you, Kim.
Sure. Um, then Judah stepped up to him and said, "Oh, my lord, let your servant please speak a word in my lord's ears, and do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, saying, 'Have you a father or a brother?' And we said to my lord, 'We have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead. He alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him.' Then you said to your servants, 'Bring him down to me, so that I may set my eyes on him.' We said to my lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die.' Then you said to your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more.' When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my lord. And when our father said, 'Go again, buy us a little food,' we said, 'We cannot go down. Only if our younger brother goes with us will we go down. Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One left me, and I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since. If you take this one also from me, and harm comes to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in sorrow to Sheol. Now therefore, when I come to your servant, my father and the boy is not with us. Then, as his life is bound up in the boy's life, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became surety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I will bear the blame in the sight of my father all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my lord in place of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father."
Thank you, Kim.
That's a lot of loop-de-loop.
There's a lot of loop-de-loops there. Yeah. Yeah. As he's recapitulating the whole, you said, what strikes you off?
They don't want to let the father down, so much so that they're willing to enslave themselves for the rest of their lives. Both of them, I guess.
Although I'm at the very end, the last sentence where he says, I fear to see the suffering that would come upon my father, I would add in, and me.
Yes.
Exactly.
Judah is the
Yeah.
one who is surety. Hey, I'll stay down here because if I go back there, I've had it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It seems as though it's almost unbelievable, and maybe we're supposed to suspend our disbelief. But when they bring up the death of Joseph, you would think that some light would go on in their brains and say, "Oh, the same age, and yeah, this could really be." But I guess to have the story go forth, they can't see the light at this point.
It reminds me so much of a Shakespearean comedy, right? With the disclosed identity and all. I mean, there is some humor to this, and I think that's probably why Andrew Lloyd Webber decided this would make such a great musical, because it does lend itself to being enacted on stage. Yeah, because you'd think, wouldn't they say, as Winnie the Pooh would say, think, think, think. but there's no recollection, there's no recognition, I should say, no revelation at this point that maybe they are talking, in fact, to this brother who has been, that they believe has been torn to pieces. Yeah.
Although Judah's very precise, though, and he says, "Our father said
That's true.
that I have lost a son who's been torn to pieces," because they know that's not true.
That's true. Although they
That's
don't
their
know what's
conspiracy.
happened to it. That's
They
right.
don't know what happened,
But-
but they certainly know he was not torn. In fact, they dipped the coat in blood to set the whole thing up.
Point. Ray, you were going to say something too.
Yeah, well, but I mean, this is a good, memorable story. This could be easily part of an oral tradition, and the back and forth is like that. I find it entirely plausible, though, that they do not recognize him. I mean, if Joseph was, let's say, a preteen or just a middle school age, the transformation into adulthood, as we have watched our own kids and grandkids, nephews and nieces, is amazing. And you add a beard to that, and 20 years, it is unrecognizable, absolutely unrecognizable. So I find this entirely plausible, as not just as a dramatic device, but as, if it had actually happened in exactly this way, you got me.
Well, and as we said last week, Joseph has fully taken on the customs of the Egyptians, right?
Yeah.
And so that's another layer that makes it prevent recognition. Ellie, were you going to say something?
Well, just that they're probably not likely to be focused, intently at this steward who's got their lives in his hands, and it would be rude. And so they're really not looking that hard at him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right now, he's just sort of a cloud of authority and danger. But Alter does go into the way John says that there may be some vestigial regret from the loss of Joseph in the first place in Judah's mind.
See, I believe, and maybe I'm naive or more generous than I should be, but I believe that there is some metanoia, some repentance going on. And even earlier on, when they talk about the guilt of your servants, they're not guilty of taking the money, right? That was planted in their pouches, their sacks, and they're not guilty of taking the chalice. And yet they're talking about the guilt of, and so I wonder if there is, as you say, even if they don't know that they're talking to the one whom they have betrayed, I wonder if there is, at a human level, we kind of do this, right? We know the wrongs we have done, and they weigh on us. So I do wonder if there's some of that going on. And that, again, that may be way more generous than they deserve.
Maybe they feel guilty to the father, not necessarily to Joseph. You know what I mean? Like they feel guilty for what they've inflicted on their father, and they don't want to do it again.
And they've kept up the pretense for decades. So
Decades. Yep.
Can't go back now.
And and Judah's life is on the line too. So there are lots of layers of complication to this. On the one hand, it seems like a pretty straightforward story, but there's more going on, I think, maybe.
This seems to me like the prodigal son, and which is basically about the jealousy between the brothers. And you have this same thing here, and they still seem to value their father's opinion very, very highly, and to really resent when they're not getting the love they should, and the younger ones do.
Absolutely. I mean, they do have daddy issues, right? And I guess it makes sense. I'm an only child. I do not have 11 siblings, same gender siblings. But can you imagine being one of 12 brothers? And the youngest two are so clearly favored. I mean, it's just a recipe for therapy. And barring that, then very complicated behavior. So great point, Donna. Anything else? Well, why don't we then look at chapter 45? Okay, this is the big reveal, the big aha. So let's see. Would somebody like to read? Oh, so this whole chapter really is the story. Would someone like to read either part or all of chapter 45, this story?
Okay.
Thank you, Ellie. Can you see it okay? How's that?
Yeah. Let's see. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Now, when the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, "Joseph's brothers have come," Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, 'Do this, load your animals, and go back to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me, so that I may give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you may enjoy the fat of the land.' You are further charged to say, 'Do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Give no thought to your possessions, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.'" The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons according to the instruction of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. To each one of them he gave a set of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of garments. To his father he sent the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers on their way, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Do not quarrel along the way." So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, "Joseph is still alive. He is even ruler over all the land of Egypt." He was stunned. He could not believe them. But when he told them all the words of Joseph that he had said to them, And when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Israel said, "Enough. My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die."
Thank you.
Oh,
All right. Thoughts?
yes, it's off the wall, but I am getting, because of the setting, I am getting kind of odd connections with the current droughts in California and all, and fires and famines and displacements and people relocating in the face of disaster, which is not part of this story at all, but it does evoke that
Yeah, it does.
with
I
what's going on around us.
Totally.
thought the same thoughts.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm not fully crazy. Okay.
Either that or you've got really good company.
Yeah, well, it's a loony bin, you know.
Did you hear
I
the
noticed that.
story of the lady who, the agent who said to a lady, "You got a second house. Why don't you rent this house and go and live in your second house? And I'll rent it." And the previous rent was $15,000 a month, but they put it up to
Wow.
$29,000 a month.
Good
And then when
gracious.
the reporters heard about it, it quickly went off the listing.
Wow. I can't get my head around that kind of number.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
What strikes me is do not quarrel among yourselves. And
Yes.
I don't know whether I guess he knows them. He knows them.
My
There
study
was a
Bible
footnote on
has a
that.
footnote on that and says, this takes us back to when they were quarreling with Joseph, 25 years earlier. It's sort of
Mhm.
an ironic
So-
twist on
Yeah.
what happened.
Maybe Joseph is just being funny.
Yeah.
There was a footnote there. Patty, what did the footnote say?
So be agitated. Do
Be
not
agitated.
quarrel
Okay.
or be agitated along the way. Let's see what the Hebrew says. We haven't looked at the Hebrew. That's verse 24, and it's Genesis 45. Let's see. Let's see what the Hebrew for quarrel is. Tremble, quake, rage, quiver, be agitated, excited, perturbed. So interesting, it gets translated as quarrel, but it has more of a internal sense, I think, than external, right? I'm always interested.
Alter has a long footnote on that.
What does he say?
It's long enough I haven't read it, but I'll read it out loud. There has been some dispute about the meaning of the verb here, occasionally used in contexts that associate it with anger. And so many interpreters have imagined that Joseph is warning his brothers not to yield to mutual recrimination and perhaps fall to blows on the way home. But the primary meaning of the verb is to quake or shake, either physically as a mountain in an earthquake, or emotionally as a person trembling with fear, and is the antonym of being tranquil or at peace. In all likelihood, Joseph is reassuring his brothers that they need not fear any lurking residue of vengeance on his part that would turn their journey homeward into a trap.
That's very helpful, I think.
Completely different take.
Yeah. Again, it's just so interesting, all of the nuances of the Hebrew, right? And it can mean very different things depending on how it's interpreted. I had a question. Let's see, where is it? God, at verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. What do you make of that?
I have some thoughts on that.
Do tell.
Because I think when extremely bad things happen to people, there's this terminology that a lot of people use, like, oh, he rose in spite of something.
Mhm.
But with Joseph, he adopts, and I think this is the healthier way to be, not to rise in spite of something, but to rise because of something, to take the negativity as the stepping stone. And I think that's what he does. He knows that he's in this extremely fortunate role of leadership and respect and, all of these other things, wealth, etc. And he has this because of what's happened to him. So I think it's a difference of rising because of something versus rising in spite of something. And because he's adopted this attitude, he's able to really move past it and see the greater divinity in it. So
That's
I see it also as forgiving his brothers. I mean, he's not forgiving, but saying, look, it's all God's plan. What you did, I don't hold you responsible for what you did. Apparently, this is all what God wanted to do. And it wouldn't have happened unless you had sold me to Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Alter's got an interesting footnote on this. Joseph's speech is a luminous illustration of the Bible's double system of causation, human and divine. Commenters have tended to tilt the balance to one side, making Joseph a mouthpiece of piety here. His recognition of a providential plan may well be admirable from the point of view of monotheistic faith, but there is no reason to assume that Joseph has lost the sense of his own brilliant initiative and all he has accomplished. And so when he says God, Elohim, which could also suggest something more general like providence or fate, he also means Joseph. Before you is the first intimation that he intends the whole clan, before you, in quotes, is the first intimation that he intends the whole clan to come down to Egypt after him.
Oh, that's great. So we're not talking about Yahweh here. So remember, Elohim is the plural noun. And as Ray just read for us, it is more general, and it could mean gods, as in, the pagan gods, the Godhead, or it could mean as Ray read from Alter, providence or fate or something like that. So I love that. God, Joseph means God, but Joseph. Yeah.
Sometimes people say the universe has done this.
Correct. People say that a lot, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it makes sense in a lot of contexts.
Agreed.
Well, I think it makes complete sense because he was the little boy or teenager who was telling them his dreams. And so he had the power. He was born with it.
Yeah.
And that started
Good point.
everything.
Good point.
That divination that he talked about in the last chapter, right? So, even though in that sense, when he was talking about knowing that he was going to find the chalice in one of his brother's bags, he does have as you say, Donna, he does have the power of divination. From a young boy, he was able to interpret these dreams, and these dreams tended to come true. His interpretations came true. So he is special. He has been singled out. And it's interesting that Jacob always seemed to know this, hence the coat of many colors, which, becomes a problem. Becomes the source of his brother's jealousy, but it's also a mark of his giftedness. So Joseph is arranging to gather his whole family with him down in Egypt. Now, how does this fit in with the covenant promise made to Joseph's great grandfather, Abraham?
Well, one of the things is he would be preserved and increase and multiply, and he can't do that in a land where he's going to die of famine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that part of the promise is upheld.
So this sojourn into Egypt is necessary for their salvation, right? Their physical salvation.
I could riff on that and say that being tied to a particular land has not limited God's power, and it goes on even as people move into other locations, other cultures, and other times.
Yeah, at least they're still alive and still procreating and
absolutely
creating more generations
together, right?
And in fact, I mean, it's a diaspora from the land that they thought they were given.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it continues. So the land isn't the key. We should tell this to contemporary people, but
I was going to say the same thing. Such an emphasis on this ownership or occupation of land. Yeah. What else do you notice or wonder about here?
I think it's the Pharaoh is so supportive. He is not jealous or wanting to control the situation. He's really in support of everything that
he seems to have a very high opinion of how much stuff they've managed to stockpile. If the famine's only 2 years into the famine, and he's inviting this whole crowd of people to come and stay and live off what they've got.
Yeah.
Although, at least to me, apparently, the land is Pharaoh's. Joseph doesn't have any authority over the land. He can open the granaries and stuff, but it requires Pharaoh for him to affirm Joseph's, essential request. Can I bring my whole family down here and settle them? And he says, yes, you can. You're so important to me. You can do that.
Yeah.
And if I were Pharaoh, I'd be thinking, who knows? Maybe there's another Joseph in that plan. And I win again.
Mm-hmm.
So what is Goshen compared to Egypt? Where Joseph says you can settle in the land of Goshen, and then Pharaoh says the best of the land of Egypt is yours.
Yeah, that's a great question. And
it's up near the delta.
I thought it was near the Sinai or in the Sinai near the.
It's near the Sinai, but it's also near the delta. So it sort of borders between, according to this map.
hang on, let me pull up a map here so that we can all see.
And there's a altar.
Is Goshen considered the better part of Egypt? I guess that's my question.
Well, it's near
Are
the
they
delta,
talking
so
about the same? Are they talking about the same thing?
Alter
Well,
says
here's
it's
Alter's
the rich lands
description of it.
in the delta, in the Nile Delta.
Yeah.
Yeah, referred to area as rich pasture land of the Nile Delta, which would be close to the border of the Sinai. In historical fact, Semitic nomads from Sinai were granted permission by the Egyptian government to graze their flocks in that region.
So it's not exactly empty land.
Okay. So Joseph says Goshen, and then Pharaoh even one-ups it and says Egypt. I mean, maybe they're differentiating.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so
For
here,
being in the Delta, it may well be considered some of the best land of Egypt.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah.
which would make sense. All
But
right.
it's still a long way from the land that God gave to Abraham and everybody else.
Absolutely. It's not Canaan. And stay tuned. I know we're not going to be reading Exodus at this point, but you know, fast forward many generations before not Moses, but Joshua finally crosses into Canaan with the people of Israel. So long time down the road. You know, God takes the long view, we'll say that. As this,
No, does nobody go back? In other words, we get left here with the family coming down to preserve the remnant, but they're just there until Exodus, until they're
yeah,
enslaved.
because the people of Israel eventually, under a different Pharaoh, will become enslaved. And so this is, Israel, Jacob / Israel and his descendants are, in exile in Egypt. And it won't be until the Exodus, the Passover, when Moses leads them out, that they are released from this. So it's a very long-term prospect, we'll say that. All right, this seems like a good place to stop, unless anyone has anything else to say about 45 rather. So we'll pick up at chapter 46 next week. And Elin, blessings on your travels. Let me
Thank you so much.
just